Welcome to Happy Talks with Dr. Alice and Donovan. Dr. Alice Fong is a holistic naturopathic doctor and founder of Amour de Soi Wellness, and Donovon Jenson is a software engineer and founder of HowToHappy.com. Together, they're out to cause more happiness in the world.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Happy Talks. My name is Dr. Alice, and this is my amazing co-host, Donovan. And today we have a special guest, Bethany Nicole. She is a LA-based author, a freelance writer, and a relationship expert. And today we're talking about forgiveness. I think we've all had to be there at some point. So please welcome Bethany. Thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Of course, of course. So yeah, let's just dive right in. And why don't we start by you telling us a little about your story and what led you to writing about forgiveness or your journey to that?
Yeah, definitely. So I kind of started, I guess, writing more in college. My degree's in philosophy, actually.
Mm-hmm.
So I was really working a lot with that and kind of concepts of different types of forgiveness that religions have answers to and philosophy has answers to.
Mm-hmm.
And then after college, I worked in social services for a couple of years, kind of in the trenches of child protective services. So working with children and families in crisis, which is another place where you see a lot of apologies that never happen and a lot of people living out kind of that resentment and anger, turning to a lot of substances and different things. And then after leaving that and kind of like diving more into writing, I just kind of realized like how all of these components come together and how they came together in my own life. I came from a really difficult family as well. So just a lot of resentments that I carried too, and kind of letting it affect my life and taking it into relationships and not realizing that, these apologies are probably not coming. And we have that happen in our lives a lot, that there's a lot of resentment, there's a lot of waiting around for them, and they just don't come. And we really have to learn to start writing them ourselves and letting these things go, because otherwise we're just dragging this around, and worse, we're repeating it. Like what I saw in social services is, these parents' resentments and coming into the next generation, and just really how it's holding us back in our own lives more than it's affecting anybody else.
Yeah, so you mentioned sort of this idea of writing it yourself, and I'm not sure that that's something that most people would be familiar with necessarily. I'd be curious if you could expand a little bit more on what you mean by that and just sort of how that fits in with, your understanding of forgiveness or what you've learned out of it.
Yeah, definitely. So I kind of explore it a little bit more in my book. I kind of use a three-step apology process, and it's kind of split into two parts because the book is really based on your writing the apologies from the perspective of the person who never gave them to you. So those are a little more humorous, a little more fun, and the book is based on them in the dating and relationship category.
Mm-hmm.
But when I'm talking about like the deeper aspects of it, the bigger apologies we really feel are the ones that we want to give ourselves, right? We're really the most angry at ourselves in a lot of these situations. Like, why didn't I speak up? Why didn't I leave sooner? Why didn't I do X, Y, or Z? And so often we're really not in positions to do any of that, right? Like we're children, or we just don't have the experience or understanding of how to do that. So really we're kind of getting in the deeper work of giving the apology to ourselves and writing it to ourselves as well. And so I kind of break that down into a three-step process where you have basically the first step would be like validation. Completely validate the emotion that you have created or feel from the situation. And it's all the emotions, every emotion. There's no getting into like, well, you shouldn't have felt this, or maybe I shouldn't have felt that. It's just pure validation of these are the emotions that you felt, and they're heard and they're seen. And I'm sorry that you felt X, Y, and Z.
Right.
That's really what we're trying to get from the apologies, right? Like some sort of validation that, or we're sad, or we're angry. So that's kind of where validation comes in. And then it's acknowledgement. So acknowledgement is just kind of, it shouldn't have happened, or it wasn't right, or you didn't deserve that, or kind of whatever the situation calls for. Because I feel like really we have to get to the emotion first, because that's the thing that's blocking us. And then we can kind of step into the situation itself of, you're right, it shouldn't have happened. You were a child, you shouldn't have been in this, or, you were a great partner, you didn't deserve to be cheated on, whatever acknowledgement of the situation. And then the one that really I feel like is a great way to kind of wrap it up is the assurance. The assurance that it's not going to happen again, or it's not going to happen the same way, because we're taking our accountability and moving forward with it. So even if all the accountability we can take is, it's not going to happen again because I'm going to reach a point of forgiveness, so I'm not having to relive this, or I'm going to recognize the red flags, I'm going to leave sooner, I'm going to go to therapy, I'm going to not drink as much, like whatever it is, it's kind of an assurance we give ourselves of like, okay, this is what I can do, what's in my power to help myself moving forward.
Yeah, I really think that's a much more empowered approach, instead of thinking like, well, when is he gonna get around to apologizing so I can move on? That kind of gives yourself the power when you focus more inward on your own emotions and your thought process, and forgiving yourself for having put up with it or not walking away sooner, if that was the case. I do kind of think about forgiveness, like the thing that pops into my head is that old, I don't know if it's like a Buddhist saying or something, like, you don't forgive people for them, it's more for yourself, because it's like drinking poison and expecting that person to die when it's really just poisoning yourself, essentially. I butchered that, but yeah, that's kind of the gist of it. What are your thoughts about people though, when they're so hyper focused on that other person? It's like they have to like clean up this mess that they made, and they never do. So it's like, how do they let that go? And do they try to just forgive them even though they did bad behavior? That's where my brain's sticking me.
Yeah, it's a tough one. I mean, none of this stuff is easy, right? Like this is
Right.
really high spiritual work, really high human work, like whatever you want to call it. So definitely none of it's easy. But I think, for me, for example, like in my life, like my father is just a mess. And he, in my mind, is almost like a Tasmanian devil just spinning. And like, if you get anywhere near it, you're caught in.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of apologies that I'm never going to receive on that end. Right. And he's done a lot of things that, are really difficult to forgive. But the way I was able to do it was just kind of just separate it out of like, this is his mess, right? Like this is his Tasmanian devil behavior. And I can do absolutely nothing about that. Yeah. What I can control is what my interaction is. So I stay way outside of the mess and the spinning. And that gives me more perspective of how little it has to do with me. We haven't talked in like 2 years and he still does his stuff. It has nothing to do with me. This is just what's going on with him. And knowing that allows me to have more of a space for forgiveness, because I can see the behavior without being trapped in it emotionally. I can see it. It doesn't affect me at all because I'm over here, not part of it. So I can see like what a wounded person this is, who is doing all of these things. And like, we can see it in our own lives. Like our worst behavior is when we feel the worst, right? Like when we're not at our best and we are lashing out, or we're, doing whatever, it's not because we're just like terrible human beings. We're just really, really hurt most of the time.
Right.
It comes out in all of these ways. So that's kind of how I reached a point of forgiveness with him, which is a point I never thought to. And it's an ongoing process. Like there are, better days of it than others, but like, yeah, just creating that distance from their behavior is their behavior. It's their mess. And if they choose to clean it up, that's great. If they don't, all I can control is my interaction with it and my decision around it. And so my decision was to completely extricate myself from that. brought me so much peace and so much less engagement and so much more of a place where I can forgive and just say, like, I was in the Tasmanian devil, like, read. Yeah. I was in the mess. And so I got all of this mess on me, but like ultimately it had nothing to do with me, and it still doesn't.
So going back a little bit to when you're talking about sort of the framework that you use or have worked on, I'm curious if you see, because like it makes total sense to me, right, that you first have to sort of acknowledge your emotions, figure out how to get them into a place where you're not like completely locked in that frame of mind where, when you're too emotional in any direction, it's very, very hard to think straight. Anyway, you move from that into sort of the situation, understanding what's going on, and then moving into sort of what you have control over and the things you can sort of do about it. I'd be curious if you see any common sort of traps that people fall into as they try to move between those things.
I mean, I would think, like, you would think that the emotional part would be the biggest trap, but I think really the part that's more of a trap is when those emotions are going unacknowledged and people feel like they have to prove and validate them to other people, right? Like if you're constantly trying to get the other person to see your point of view, you're just not in a space to do that. That's where like more anger, more resentment. So I feel like really that was like initially going into it where I thought I was going to have the most trouble, but that part's actually a lot smoother, because once the emotions are out and it's like validated and it's okay that you feel whatever you feel about that scenario, then it's like almost more of a relief. They're just like, okay, like this is fine, because how often are you people try to convince you, well, you shouldn't feel this about it, or you shouldn't feel that about it. It's like, no, they're going to feel how they feel. I would say really more the assurance piece is where it can get a little stickier. Asking people to take some accountability, which is like, depending on the scenario, it's like, well, what did I do in that? Like I was a child, or I was like such a great partner, and why should I take any accountability? Like, you're not really taking accountability for the situation. You're taking accountability for what you can control. And so even if the assurance is only, if you're like a child and you've been abused, like what role do you have in that really? But what you do for yourself is the assurance is, well, I'm going to go to therapy, or I'm going to go to yoga, or I'm going to do whatever it is to work through these emotions. So I'm not reliving it over and over and bringing it out in relationships. So even if like the only assurance you have is what you're going to do to help heal yourself, that's plenty. So it's not taking responsibility for like, oh, well, it was my fault that, I got cheated on or whatever. It's not that, but that's where people can kind of get stuck. Like, I don't have any blame in this. Why am I having to do anything? Like, and it's like, okay, well then the assurance is that you've learned the red flags. The assurance is you won't put yourself in that situation. Or if you find yourself in it, you're going to get out faster. Like that's the assurance.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that makes total sense. What I'm kind of hearing is this idea of coming to like acceptance of, what happened with whatever situation it was, forgiving them and understanding that they did what they did because it was their own hurt. It had nothing to do with you. And it's unfortunate that you got caught up in that Tasmanian devil mess, but sometimes that happens. And also, I think on the other side of that, it's like forgiving yourself, because I know like children might blame themselves because it's like, I provoked him, or I did something, or it's like I was too weak, and having some like compassion and forgiveness for yourself and seeing like, what can I do moving forward to prevent this from happening again? Maybe it's like disconnecting from him altogether. Even though I forgive him, I can't be a part of that anymore. So stepping away, or whatever kind of healing work that needs to be done to mend the relationship, if it's even possible.
Yeah. And it's interesting. They've done a lot of studies in like child psychology, and like, they use this example a lot of like, there was a little boy whose parents divorced, and right before they divorced, he like, I forget what he did. He did something to like a car window, like he kicked it or, and so like, his parents divorced like, I don't know, a week later, and it had absolutely nothing to do with that. But for like years, the child was like internally, subconsciously, like, I kicked the car window, I made them fight, I caused their work. And so they've like really, and kids do that kind of thing a lot. But what a lot of the child psychologists or just psychologists are really thinking now is like, that's actually a form of control, that the child, even that perception is like, I created it. Like, it's not just random. It's like, it's just some kind of like interesting way that they're trying to control the narrative or to control the situation because it's so beyond them. And so that's kind of where I went with assurance. Is I almost like thought about calling it like acceptance. And then when I kind of was working with those studies, it was like, okay, so if it's more about like control or feeling like you have some power over the situation, then maybe it should be more like assurance, like what you can do. And that puts the control back to you. So you're not doing things like blaming yourself for kicking the window or like, you know, and I think that so often we just do try to grab that control because some of these things are so beyond us and feel like they just come out of nowhere. Or if you're, you know, a great parent or a great kid or a great girlfriend or whatever, and then these awful things are happening, that just feels like so beyond something you can control. You're like, I tried so hard and yet, but this like gives you that power back of like, well, you can't control maybe that outcome, but you can control what you can't control.
Yeah, I found that particular set of ideas, like kind of this moving from understanding, and I think like maybe a relationship where someone cheats on you is a good example, moving from the position where you think like, oh, if I act in a certain way, then, you know, if I'm a good significant other, this person won't cheat on me, to this sort of more developed place of like, okay, I can do my best, or I can do, it could be me or it could be anyone. This other person has their own set of, you know, beliefs and desires that may or may not lead them to act in that way, right? Cheat on me or not. Like, it may not even be tied to my behavior at all. And then on the flip side, sort of like, it might be, right? Like in some circumstances, it could be like, what's a common story? Like the distant husband who's never home and never checks in and never pays attention. And like, yeah, it's not necessarily your fault, but then there's like a larger piece of responsibility to take on. I'd be curious if you found any like tools or strategies or anything that helps people sort of move from that first position to that second set of ideas, because I know for me personally, like that was a huge long journey that I don't really remember the details of, but one that has served me extremely well now that I'm on the other end of it. I just don't remember any of the in between.
As far as like step 2 to 3, like getting to the assurance piece, or like which step, I guess.
Yeah, so more from less in the framework, more from sort of this idea of like feeling responsible for everything.
Oh yeah.
And moving towards being able to see sort of like, yeah, maybe I do have some responsibility in this, but I don't shoulder the weight of everything, right? Like, sure, this person cheated on me, and then maybe there are some things I should look at. But at the end of the day, like it's this interplay between two people.
Yeah, and it can go really deep, especially in that scenario, because I think we can waver a lot, right? We can go from, taking all the blame or taking absolutely none of the blame. And I think usually more, especially in situations like that, the places where you could find some assurance is kind of seeing like where you could have communicated your needs more, or where you could have done X, Y, and Z. But then there's also just kind of looking at that person as a whole, right? Like, is this a pattern for them? Like, how that's kind of like, you kind of have to be a little bit of a detective to see like how much responsibility you take. And just kind of intuitively, I think we kind of know when someone is saying something to us, if it really resonates with us. You know, if you're getting dumped because somebody's saying like you're drinking too much, like, does that resonate with you? Or are you like, no, I don't even drink, what are you talking about? You know, like, you deep down, we do kind of know what's resonating. And kind of, I think that's part of the process too, is just getting really intuitive and comfortable with how we are in relationships and where our own inner work is too. And, you know, because if somebody has a pattern of cheating, your work in that is maybe not why they cheated on you, but why are you attracting that pattern? Like, what's going on? Because I really do feel that we can find places to improve in every aspect of our lives, and especially in our relationships, because I feel like there's such mirrors to our own inner work. But yeah, it really is. I mean, and I think what I see a lot is people kind of vacillate initially between the two, like where they're like, I didn't do anything, and they're like, I did it all. And then eventually with some work, they kind of get more to the center of like, okay, yeah, his pattern is cheating, but I'm codependent in some ways, being in someone who is allowed. Because by the time a relationship gets to that, generally speaking, there's been a lot of buildup. Like this person has done some things that maybe could have given away. This is their mindset, that they're putting themselves first in the relationship. Or they've reached out to you and you're not hearing them or respecting what they're saying. So now they're going to someone else. But like, there's usually some, you know, some framework of something that's gone wrong to this point. You know, it's pretty rare that like people think the relationship is amazing and then their partner, there's usually some in between. I mean, that does happen, right? Like that, but yeah, usually there's some work that can, you know, be done regardless.
Yeah, you said something that I think really resonated with me was I was just thinking of the situation where, okay, someone cheats on their partner and the person forgives them and they stay together, but then he does it again or she does it again. And then she forgives him or he forgives him and then they do it again. And I'm just like, do you just forgive them each time and just go back to them? It's like, but you said the word perfectly of codependency and looking inward and being like, what am I do? Why am I allowing this to happen? Or why does this keep happening? Am I not like strong enough to leave the relationship or just kind of have that look inward on what's going on there that's stopping you from living? It's like, doesn't mean you forgive them. I mean, every situation's different. You know, some people do cheat and they stay together because of the kids or because that there's enough love or that the partner shows that they're willing to work on the relationship and improve themselves and in the relationship and heal it from there. So maybe it can strengthen a relationship, even though it's a terrible thing that happens. On the other side, it can maybe just be a continuous pattern that doesn't change. So I think you brought up a really great point with that.
Yeah. And I think, you know, I am talking about using the framework for the apologies we give ourselves, but you can also use it as, you know, someone else is giving you the apology, and that can kind of show you where their mindset is too. Because in the cheating scenario, if they're not giving you any kind of assurance of like what's going to change,
what's going to be
I'm sorry, I won't do that again. Like that is lame. Like
that's it.
Like, so you can kind of see like, you know, judging off of what are the assurances and what are they actually acknowledging or validating for you? Like, are they validating your emotion, or are they just saying like, well, you were never around, so this is why I did that. And they're not even giving you space to have any emotion about it or any acknowledgement of like, you're right. Like, even if you weren't around, I should not have done that. That wasn't right. You deserve that. And then some assurance, like if they're able to give you that kind of apology, then like maybe the relationship has some hope after something like that. But yeah, I mean, it really just depends on the scenario and how much of it is like their mess individually, how much of it is like you as a mess as a couple, like are you overlapping messes, like what's going on, scenarios, you know?
Yeah, I mean, just in my current relationship, it wasn't cheating, but you know, there's some things that he did at moments, especially in our early relationship, that I would consider pretty unforgivable or just not very nice, or a big strain on our relationship, and something that could have been like considered like worth walking away from, but I made it for me specifically. It's like, okay, I don't want just an apology. I need you to take action. So I laid out like 5 things that you need to read this personal development book. You need to go to therapy. You need to do this. And then I know that you're really committed to this and wanting to work at healing this relationship. And he did. So that kept us going and it helped us grow stronger. But if it was cheating, I don't know. That's pretty zero. I have been cheated on. And so that's like a zero tolerance type of thing. But, you know, if it's like something, and it's like every individual gets to decide for themselves, like what's their limit and when is it time to walk away. But I just wanted to share that because I thought like, okay, well, maybe they want to have forgiveness. They want to show that they're willing to work on the relationship and that they're sorry, but it's like, what is that without any action? Like, what can they do? And maybe that can be a shared conversation on like, okay, what needs to happen for you to be able to move on? And then it's the other piece of it, like, if I do all these things, are you going to actually forgive me? Or are you going to still hold this against me later on? And that's not healthy either.
Right. But it's a tough one because, you know, it's not as, I mean, I've seen couples who like got cheated on and then immediately the person was like, well, he said sorry, I forgive him, it's fine. And it's like, give yourself some time to work through
Right.
like, and, you know, let the trust build itself back up. You know, it can't just be, you know, immediately like it was before. It's a huge break.
Right.
And, you know, I mean, yeah, cheating is like its own animal in relationships, and like everyone I think kind of has their own opinions on it, and I try not to like push mine on clients, but if it was, I mean, because it's ultimately their choice, right? Like I'm just here to facilitate their journey. But just in general, I don't usually, in my own personal opinion, feel like it's really worth rebuilding past it. Because it's, I mean, if you're married and have kids, then yeah, maybe it's worth a shot. But if you're just like dating the person and they're doing
it's like no thing.
Like, why are you in therapy and you're not even married? Like, this is too intense for your dating time. And it's just such a like deep like hole in the relationship. It takes so much to rebuild, and it's really not ever the same relationship, right? You're actually building a new relationship, and that can like maybe bring you closer. There is that possibility, but you're also having to go back and see what caused it to begin with. Like, is it miscommunication? Is it somebody, you know, not getting what they need? Is it a pattern? Like, you have to like go back and figure out, where did this come from and how do we fix even that problem? And now we have the new problems of like, I have no choice for you. And like, you know, so it's really just, I mean, it's just so much work, which like, if you have a lot on the line, of course, like if you're married and you have kids and you've been together for a while and like, you're really dedicated to it, then maybe it's worth the work for you. But if you've been dating for like 3 months, it's like,
definitely not.
why? Like, why, you know?
Yeah.
So, I mean, but again, like that's just kind of my personal opinion. And there are actually like therapists who specialize in helping couples work through that specific experience. And they have, you know, I guess pretty solid success rate, all things considered. So it can be done, but like, just in my personal opinion, I just am like, why? Like, why do you want to if you don't have that much like invested in it? I just think it's kind of a sign that that person's maybe not ready for the kind of relationship you're ready for, you know?
Yeah, just as a side tangent, I also see a lot of times in those relationships, they keep like coming unglued and then back together. A lot of times, at least one of the people, well, almost always one of the people has like a very strong, just like scarcity mindset in terms of like, oh, maybe I have to stay with this person because I will not be able to find anyone else. And like, they make me feel terrible because they're doing these things, but I'm not going to be able to find anyone else out there. At least that's what I've seen as one of the most common things for people who stick in stuff like that and just keep trying when it doesn't necessarily seem like a good idea. Like you said, when your whole life, or 20, 30, 40, 50 years and some kids are built into it, then that's a different story, a different set of calculations. But usually on the early end of things, it's people who don't recognize that there are just countless people out there to potentially meet and date instead.
Yeah, no, that's a big one. And it extends to a lot of stuff. Like I see people put up with a lot of things because then, it's the scarcity of like, either I'm with this person or I'm alone. And that's it. And it's like, so they deal with just all these things like, this person talking to their ex, or this person like, I don't know, like drinking every day or like whatever. And, not being able to see that there are plenty of people in the world that don't have this stuff going on. Like you You go on Hinge right now and find 5 people who don't talk to their exes. Like there's
Right, exactly.
people who don't have, like, this is your decision. Do you want to deal with this or not? If you want to work with it, like, again, like in relationships, I really believe we have a lot more free will than we realize. Like, especially because I do a lot of the astrology and tarot in my sessions, people are like, are we meant to be? Is this fated? You know, and I'm like, I just feel like we have so much ability to create our own. And we have choice, right? So, like, you know, can this relationship work? You could probably force it to. You can give up a lot of stuff. You can sacrifice, you can compromise, and you can like literally stay in that relationship and break up or not divorce. You can create that reality for yourself. Do you want to create that reality for yourself? Like, do you want to give up a lot of things? Like, that's, you know, that's the decision point of like, that's where our discernment comes in.
Yeah.
And could you find someone that doesn't talk to their ex every day, and you would be a lot more connected to that person and have a lot more going on? But yeah, I mean, I just think it's our own kind of free will with some of these things. And you know, some people are okay with giving up like passion or excitement, and they would rather have security and stability, and like that's their free will, that's their decision. And, you know, like, I'm not here to judge it for them. I'm here to like support it. Like, in my personal life, do I want that? No. Like, in my personal life, do I want to choose passion and excitement? I do, but that's, you know, just kind of free will, I guess.
I think what I see in those types of situations, or what I observe, is that like oftentimes in those situations, that person loves that, if like that person cheats on them, they stay with them because they love that person more than they actually love themselves. And it's like that lack of self-love to be like, oh, well, but then I mean, I personally can't understand like forgiving them and then just being in constant fear and worry of them doing it again. I don't think I could just like relax and enjoy the relationship, because I think of that when Samantha got cheated on in Sex and the City, and she was like so like paranoid that he was gonna cheat again, so she like spied on him and everything, and she went over the top, and then she finally was like, I can't handle this. I love myself more. I love you, but I love myself more. Was basically, and she walked out, because being paranoid all the time is really not self-love in a way, and that we worry, and so I think that's a big piece of it.
Yeah, and you really can't, I just feel like there's no growth in that space. Like, if you are still together and people are in that space, then like it's survival mode of the relationship. You're like just going through day by day. There's nobody's like focusing on themselves. Nobody's able to grow or breathe.
Right.
Like, I mean, can you make that work? Sure. But like, why do you want to? Like, why do you want to spend your life and your relationship doing that when you could be in something that helps you grow and thrive as a person, you know? And I feel like that's, again, it's just the choice of like, do you want to live in survival mode in your relationship where you're stuck? And maybe someday down the road, you'll earn that trust back. Or do you want to go into something where you can openly trust and live your life? Yeah. Because all your energy is going towards that, just keeping that relationship in like some sort of stasis. So, and you're not going to ever be able to relax in that, because then, you know, what if they do it again? And you're just like, are you kidding me? Like, I've, you know, just been trying to make this work. And I just feel like, for me, it just wouldn't be worth it. But I definitely know couples who have done that and feel like it is worth it for them. And I guess it's just kind of personal choice, but I just can't imagine that hyper vigilant lifestyle. Like
it's a lot.
And and it would never be enough, right? Like, it would be like pennies in the Grand Canyon, because there's so many ways someone can cheat. There's so many platforms. There's like, you have to sleep, you have to go to work. Like, you cannot
monitor him
all the time. And like, if that's what they want to do, they will find the way. And I just, to me, that just feels so constrictive and just so tough.
Yeah, having been in that situation where I was in a relationship that someone cheated and trying to rebuild the trust, rebuilding trust is infinitely more harder than just building trust.
Yeah.
because of what you both have been saying, which is
Mhm.
like I mean, you have to trust them to a degree, because you can't, I mean, it's not really any kind of a relationship if all you're doing is monitoring every single thing they do. Like, then that's extremely controlling, and then they don't really have like
Right.
a real life.
Mhm.
But for the record, that was not successful at all. And but even just attempting it, like, rebuilding trust is much harder than building trust.
Absolutely. So, Bethany, what would you say for people, how does forgiveness contribute to, since this is Happy Talks, it's like, how does forgiveness contribute to a person's sense of happiness in a way?
Yeah, I mean, it really, like, the resentments really create a filter for
Mm.
how you view life and how you're taking in information, and more so than we even know. So I feel like when we're able to let that go and, take control of our own lives and our own healing, and understand on some level that no matter what comes our way, like, we're going to be okay. We're going to be able to take it and heal it. Like, it almost makes you feel like a superpower, like a superhuman, of like, I'm so strong in myself that, like, it doesn't matter what this person does, because I can work on it, I can heal it, I can transform it, and I can move on with my life. Like, this is my stability in this. And I feel like in that sense, in that lens, you just see things so differently. You're just so much lighter, so much happier. You don't have all this resentment you're dragging into the next relationship. Like, you can go through it fresh, with fresh eyes, fresh perspective. Like, this is a new person. This is a different person. And like, no matter what happens in this relationship, like, I'm going to be okay. Like, this is going to be, it might not be the relationship for me. It might not be the job for me, or whatever it is, but it's like, it just gives you such a sense of power of like, I can heal this and I'll be fine on the other side of it.
Yeah, beautifully said. Great. All right. Well, we really appreciate you having us on our show. Is there anything you'd like to plug before we wrap up today?
Yeah, I am taking on new clients for my relationship sessions, and that can all be found on my website, BethanyNicole.com. And you can find all of my social media, all of my writing, all of my other podcast interviews. Everything is just kind of compiled on the site.
Awesome. Yeah, check it out. We'll put the link in the description. And thank you again so much for your contribution for our forgiveness episode. And thank you everyone for tuning in. We appreciate you. If you appreciate us and want to spread happiness in the world, be sure to like, subscribe, comment, all the things that help spread the word. All right, we'll see you next time. Thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to like it and then go and subscribe to my channel and ring the bell so you get notified when the next video comes out. If you check out in the description below, go to my website where you can get my free fast and easy guide to stress relief. Thanks again for checking us out, and we'll see you next time.